Hi there, friends. I was asked if I could do a video kind of talking about the differences between reading a pip deck and like a more Waite-Smith sort of style one. And I've done various things like this before, but it's been a minute and I haven't really done any tutorials in a minute. So a minute. So I thought I would, just kind of show you both, walk you through both methods. They're actually not that different for me, and so I'll kind of talk about that. But what I'll do is I'm going to shuffle and lay out some cards from one of the decks, and then I'll pause the video, pull the same cards from the other deck, and just talk about how the differences, and similarities might play out. I'm not going to do my full 9 card because I have limited space, honestly. And it's very hot in here. So I have the air conditioner on. It's June 3rd, 2nd, and I'm air conditioning already because I'm literally sweating as I sit here. So, yeah, I think that's everything. So, I don't know. I'm just going to work with the Waite-Smith and the Game Marseille. This is the Waite-Smith that I did a video on the other day. The Carol Herzer illuminated, Starlight illuminated. And really, it's just, this was nearby, and also I'm really loving the beauty of these paintings, so you're going to have to bear with me as I choose. But it does sort of make sense, right? Because this is, these images are familiar to everybody, or just about everybody. Whether or not we like them is another story, but, they're there. So, I'm not going to shuffle too much. I'm not going to work with a question. We'll just call this a general reading. I'm going to do my 5-card line, which is usually kind of an arc, really, more than a line. But the way that I lay them out is the middle card, and the second and the third, and then the fourth and the fifth. All right, so for context, that's the 9 of Wands, 10 of Cups, the Tower, the Hierophant, or the Pope, and the Moon. All right, so I'm just going to get the same cards out of the Game Marseille, and I will spare you the journey of me searching for them. So I'll be back. All right, we're back. So that actually took much less time than I thought it was going to. But so again, 9 of Wands, 10 of Cups, the Tower, the Moon, and the Pope. So why I lay these out in an arc like this is because I will read them in different combinations. So this is something, if you've never seen me do it, this really comes from more cartomancy techniques like Lenormand, or even playing card reading, even some Marseille reading traditions, where you don't sort of limit yourself to like one set position or one set combo, right? There are different ways and different pairings of reading an arc like this. And often I'll do 7, an arc of 7. I think 5 is I used to do 3, and it's grown to 5 and now 7. Like, I just like working with a lot of cards. It gives me more context. It gives me more, color, and it also makes me feel more confident because all of that context means that I'm more confident in my answer. So the spread, there's no spread positions. It's just really working with different combinations. So in the video that prompted I'm sorry, I've got not enough space for my life. I take up a lot of space. I was going to say, and I have no idea what I was going to say, honestly, because I got distracted. So this is what it's like living inside my brain. Anyway, yeah, no set spread positions. Cartomancy said that. What I'll do is I'll kind of look at the central 3. I'll look at mirrorings. I'll look at pairings. And that often gives me a lot of information. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. The question sort of arose from me saying in a video that I find pip decks freeing. And the reason that I said that is because the images on a typically Waite-Smith inspired deck indicate an emotional meaning, right? There's an emotional reaction for most folks when they see the images, right? You see, in this case, the 9 of Wands and the Tower, very, very, dramatic imagery. Whereas, or on the other side, the 10 of Wands 10 of Cups looks very positive. In the Waite Smith, I'm sorry, in the Marseille, you don't get anything really to work with. Although this Gay Marseille does have some sort of Waite Smith kisses in the minors, which I think is fun. I honestly, one of the reasons why this is a little bit of a difficult video to make is that I don't really distinguish between reading systems anymore. It's for me the same, right? Because having this doesn't preclude you from remembering and using this, and using this doesn't preclude you from using and remembering this, right? So typically when someone is reading, I shouldn't say typically, but often, in my experience, when someone's reading with Marseille, they're sort of relying on a set system of elements, numbers, colors, or sometimes none of that, and just impressions. And so a lot of this depends on the kind of reader you are, right? I am not a visual thinker. I'm a writer. And so that's just how my brain works. I'm not opposed to visual thinking, but sometimes the image, right, gets in the way of, or makes me jump to conclusions that I'm not, like one of the things I try to do when I lay out the cards is not jump to conclusions about what I'm seeing, right? This is something that this is, Camellia Elias has this thing where she'll say, oh, the Nine of Wands means defensiveness. No, it doesn't. And it's this thing of like, no, it doesn't, that I find really valuable. It's like, I think I know what this means, but nothing means anything, right? No, regardless of the system that we're working with, regardless of the cards, nothing means anything until they come into context of a question and each other, or at least in terms of a reading and each other, right? I never use one card draws. I'm always working with at least 3 and usually more. But I always start in the same way. So I'll kind of talk you through what my mind does. And the first thing I'm going to do in a reading like this, and in most readings, is I'm going to look at the first card I put down as sort of a theme or giving me some kind of something, right? So if this is a general reading, which in this case it is, I don't have a question to work with. And so the first card put down will often give me just a sense of like theme. So starting with wands, I know that I'm in a wands realm, right? Now, it could be creativity, it could be sexuality, it could be conflict, it could be whatever I associate with wands. Earth, I was going to use the word earthy, which of course is associated with pentacles, but like, it's going to be more down to earth workings, right, than like the swords. The next thing I do is I'll kind of look at what I've got in terms of mix of cards. So in this case, I've got 1 wands card, 1 cups card, 1 cups card, no swords or coins, and 3 majors. So, I don't read the majors any differently than the minors. To me, they're just the same. They just come from different parts of the deck. They have kind of a different, I don't know what the word is, like a different, they're focused on different things. They're focused on maybe more metaphorical or broader things, I guess. But even then, it's hard to say until we're in the reading, right? Like sometimes a major card can be very, very major, and sometimes it can be very, very minor. And I talk about this in both of my books. The other thing that I would say is I'm just kind of absorbing and scanning for information, just getting an impression. I would say that this is probably kind of an active or energetic part of someone's life because there are so many majors, or they're just thinking about maybe bigger picture sort of things. Maybe their view is from a higher perspective, or they're just considering maybe the bigger ramifications of life at the moment, potentially. And then I kind of go into what I know about the cards, right? So I know that the 9s are, for me, they are exhausted. They are like Sisyphus pushing the rock up the hill every day. That's how I think of 9s, right? They also are 3 times 3. And so there's a huge potential for expansiveness because 3s are expansive and 9 triples the expansion. I know that fire is hot. I know that it's sexy. I know that it can burn out. I know that it can destroy. I know that it can create. And I also know that the Waite Smith image has someone looking sort of defensive and on edge, maybe, or living in a state of protective, stuff. So not very, like, what I'm doing out right now is sort of speaking out loud things I would be thinking. Do you know what I mean? So, like, if I sound sort of even more inarticulate than usual, it's because I'm just kind of working through the math, right? So what I know right now, regardless of the card I'm working with, is that there's a heavy possibility of burnout at play. 9 plus fire. That's actually borne out by the image on the 9 of Wands in Waitsmith in a degree, or to a degree, where we have someone who's sort of keeping their energy, keeping their matches, keeping their fire sort of out of play. They've got one weapon, and they're defending the rest of their energy with it, right? And that is very much like the feeling of having burnout. Now, with the 9 of Wands in Marseille, most of them don't have like a little skull there, right? Like this is just this deck. So, that might influence or it might not, but the thing for me is that it's not even, like, the image is like the last thing I look at, for me, right? And that may be the first thing you look at, or the first thing that many people look at, and that's okay, right? If there were a keyword on the card, let's just, do I have a keyword? Yeah, I have this Voyager deck. So there's keywords on all the cards here. So let's say that I added the 9 of Wands to the mix. That has, in this deck, the keyword of integrity. Now, that doesn't mix with anything I've said, right? Nothing about burnout. James Wanless talks about this card as meaning integrity. Now, you can kind of make a jump between the Waitsmith if you think about what this person's doing is having integrity, right? But it's a whole other system. Now, that doesn't, the keyword may or may not mean anything to me, in the same way that the image may or may not mean anything to me. It doesn't influence me as much as it used to, and the images don't influence me as much as they used to, because what I'm really after isn't so much a recitation of meanings, it's forming connections. Now, if I had started with this deck, it would have been a whole other reading. I know I would have had all the information I have about the 9s, right? I have different images here. We've got what looks like a spine. Actually, this is the World Trade Center in New York prior to its bombing. We have some religious imagery here. It looks like someone entering a temple or a mosque. It looks like a cathedral here. Lots of hands. There's a lot of hands in this deck. It looks like this is water or sky, mountain. So there's like a lot I could pull from, but none of or all of it may be that useful to me, right? So I have to now start broadening my scope. I have to start expanding my view to thinking about the other cards and the ways that they interact with each other. So, because we only have 2 minors here, I'm going to focus on those 2, because really the meanings of the majors don't change that much from system to system to me. But the 9 of Cups is the 10 of Cups is a typically really positive card for a lot of folks. Down here, you don't really get any sense of that because you just have 10 cups, right? Again, there's a little adornments, and we have a lot of queer pride flags in these particular cups because this is the Gay Marseille, right? But that, that's meaningful or not depending on the situation. Now, I don't care what is depicted on the card because context is going to be my principal guide. So even though this looks like a happy image, it doesn't matter. And even though this looks like a bad or sad image, it doesn't matter, right? What I'm doing right now is sort of saying, okay, I have a sense of what the 9 of Wands means. Now I'm going to get a sense of what the 10 of Cups means. 10s are endings. So if we think about cups in the sense of relationships, this could be the grand finale of the relationship. Because we're looking at what looks like a positive picture, doesn't mean that it's not the final act curtain. This is the happily ever after moment. But in a fairy tale, the story really begins with happily ever after. And there's no such thing as happily ever after, right? Like, we know relationships don't work that way. So this, to me, is more likely to signal the end of a relationship if I'm looking at a relationship reading, because 10s are conclusions. Or it's taking a relationship to a new phase. Now, I can't just consider the card alone, because it's not alone. It's got other cards around it. And right now, I know that the Nine of Wands is giving me a sense of burnout. Now, if I wanted to incorporate the integrity keyword from this deck, then you can be a very conscientious person. You can have a lot of integrity in your work, and that may make you into a martyr. A lot of people who have integrity will, or claim to have it, will want to show off about it, and then it becomes not integrity, it becomes ego. Right? So everything is all its opposite. Everything is its other. The other thing that I know is I have fire and water, and those can be the most destructive elements in the deck because they are the most likely to cause damage, particularly in the context of each other. They can be very steam. They can create steam. They can create explosions, or fire can evaporate the water, or water could evaporate the fire or put the fire out. So these are all things I'm just thinking about as I'm just experiencing the cards, right? 13 minutes, I'm saying out loud what would usually take me about 2 or 3 minutes to see. Again, the image isn't influencing me so much as what I know about the cards and each other, all right? So this is seeming like there's a tension at play. That's the main message that is mattering to me right now, is that there's a lot of energy, the 9 and the 10, very heavy, very tired, very having gone through a thing. They're at the end of the suit, so they've been through it. They've been around the block. So I'm starting to get a sense that this is a time of real frustration, both energetically and emotionally, maybe spiritually, for this person. And I say that because the energy of the fire and the spirituality, or the essence, the emotional aspect of the water, both are giving to, and actually their energy, their impulsive work, their creative work, or their vocation may be butting against their family life. Now, I'd be more likely to say that with the Pentacles card, but it's possible, right? What's more likely is that their work is getting in the way of their relationship, or their relationship is causing problems at work. Again, work sounds a little more pentacles-y, but the wands have a vocational quality to them. This also may represent a person in spiritual crisis. So, again, I'm not making any decisions yet. And I'm not that influenced by the images much. This may be a perfectly fine relationship, but whatever it is burning them out. The Tower underscores that. So the Tower for me is not automatically a negative card. Sometimes it's electric. Sometimes it's electricity, right? Or I talked about sort of explosions, right? The steam. So the fire and water create an explosion. And so what I'm getting is someone who's very pent up. So they're holding back. So here's where the image is going to influence me. They're holding back the tide, but it's going to burst through. Now, in the same way, I could see that in the Nine of Wands in Marseille, because it's a very closed off, flat canvas, right? So I could see that. I also know this image, and I don't forget it just because I'm working with this. So even though I'm working with this may still influence me in some cases, right? Not all of them, but some. Because this is context. This is part of my toolkit. This image. All of these images. In the same way that the element and the keyword and the number and, any other contextual associations I have. All of those are part of my toolkit. They don't go away just because I'm working with this kind of deck. I always know that the Nine of Wands looks like this in Waite-Smith decks, right? So it could influence me. I have no way of knowing if it would have, because I'm obviously, I can't unknow what I know, right? But either way, I know that someone's on the edge of burning out. I may not have gotten the sense that they're holding back the tide here the way that I did up here, but I know that something's going to burst. And that's the main thing, right? Because tarot cards are not in themselves the end goal. They are a tool we use to find information. And what I have come to believe is that whatever system we're working with, whatever makes tarot work or any kind of divination work, will recognize, oh, they're using this tool today, right? And when Tom Benjamin uses this tool, he reads this way. But he has all this other information that he's stored up. And so let's say it's my spirit guide, right? I hate that term, but let's say that's what it is. My spirit guide says, Benny is going to do this reading, and today he's using a Marseille deck, and so I'm going to give him the Nine of Wands, and I'm just going to make sure he knows that it represents holding something back, right? Whatever. Like, that's the thing, is, like, it's not about the system, it's about how we use the system, and it's more about, for me, having an intentional way of working that our guides, or whatever we want to call them, can use to translate for us. Because that's, to me, what divination is. It's a translation tool. So lots of steam, something's going to burst. Then I have the Pope and I have the Moon. When I look at this combo here of the Pope, the Ten of Cups, and the Nine of Wands, I see someone who actually is very heavily influenced by family or ancestry. The Pope here being family or ancestry or religious path. So my guess is that there's a certain amount of conservatism that has been present in their relationships, and they can't take that anymore, and it's going to burst. And then that leaves us with the Moon. And we don't know what's going to happen next because of the Moon. The Moon isn't going to tell us. What the Moon is going to tell us is that this is a cycle. What the Moon may also be telling us is that we're drawn to something darker. So if I pair the Moon with the Pope, in either case, we may actually be moving, this explosion may be moving us to a path that's darker and more intuitive than this, if that makes sense, right? Regardless of the image. Obviously, having a question helps. You know what I mean? So anyway, what I'm gonna do right now is I'm gonna put these all away, and I'm gonna draw the 5 cards with a Marseille spread, and read it for you, and then I'm gonna come back and add the Wakesmith cards and see if they would have changed at all the way that I read, right? So I'm preparing for this video to end because it does not like long videos, and I hate that, but here we go. So let's just take the Game Marseille, and I'm just going to shuffle a couple times. I love this deck, y'all, but God, linen cardstock is I'm so clumsy with it. See? Right. Usually when I have a couple bad shuffles in a row, the deck is telling me to stop. Let's go without a question again. Because that's actually more common than I wish it were. All right, so we have the 6 of Swords, the 4 of Swords, the 7 of Cups, again the Pope, and now the 5 of Swords. So we are very heavy on the swords in this reading. Okay, that's a clue right out of the gate. Lots of swords. Big swords energy. 1 Cups card, 1 Major card. No Wands, no Pentacles. So no Earth, no Fire. That's interesting. So right out of the gate, I'm going to start thinking about things I know about the suit of swords, right? Because they're dominating here. They're telling me I'm important. Swords are heady, cerebral. We can get stuck in our minds. We also may be dealing with learning or communication. We may be dealing with law enforcement or politics. Swords, class-wise, tend to represent law enforcement and politicians. The quote, justice system, right? So the addition of the Pope actually gives me more of a conservative vibe to the swords in this case, So we may be dealing with that again. The 6 is actually not quite nice. It's 6s represent beauty and loveliness and harmony, rebalancing after a 5. Except in this reading, the 6 comes before the 5, which means there may be some regression here. But 6s are, I would say good thoughts, elegant words. But it also can represent navel-gazing, because vanity is part of beauty, right? And if we become like Narcissus and we get distracted by our own reflection, then it becomes vain. And so the 6 of Swords can represent vanity, or thinking about ourselves a lot, sort of vain thinking, or talking about ourselves a lot, right? Then we have the 4 of Swords, another balanced card. But this is conservative. 4s are conservative because they're stable and stuck. And they're partnered with the Pope. The 7 of Cups, 7s for me are introspective. And there's a tie there to navel-gazing, right? Because introspection can sometimes become navel-gazing. 7s are also lucky. 7s are 3 plus 4. So they create a kind of a tension between instability and expansion and balance and stability. Cups, water, are emotional and sensational and spiritual and intuitive and all of those things. And then we have the 5 of Swords, which 5s destabilize. So we've got very kind of stable and harmonic thinking here, and very destable thinking here, or unstable thinking here, or communication. The 7 of Swords, the 7 of Cups, and the Pope really are going to have to carry some extra weight in this reading, because they're the only anomalies. So they carry a little bit more weight because we're so dominant that I need these 2 cards to kind of give me context for these 3 cards. So what do I know about the Pope? Well, I know the Pope typically, in my circle is fairly negatively looked on, right? He can represent outdated, old conservative thinking, certainly colonial thinking, certainly control over private, or attempts to control private interactions, private things. If you think about the way religion inserts itself in the bedroom. There are qualities, though, of faith, of belief, too, right? So everything is more than one thing. So it can be positive. There can be faith, there can be belief. The 7 is not a particularly negative number. In fact, what it's asking us to do is look inside and say, how do we really feel? How do we really feel about this? How do we really experience this? What emotional impact is this having on us? What do we believe? So what I get a sense of as I start to move through the reading is like, this person has been very closely associated with probably a conservative upbringing, a conservative worldview, and that has served them well up until now. They feel good, or they did. But now their sensations, their emotions, their intuitions, look at all these eyeballs on this particular one, are saying, this isn't working. 5 of Swords comes and shatters their perspective. So this, to me, is the journey, again, without a question, without more context, this is the journey of someone breaking free of a conservative tradition and discovering, I don't actually believe those things anymore because they don't align with my moral values. Again, morality coming into Cups is a connection to our morals actually make us feel things. That, our moral compass is often what gets us enraged when we see injustice, for example, right? So there's an emotional connection there. There's also a morality connection with Swords and with the Pope, right? So I do have an overall sense of morality here. So this person is on the verge of breaking through their perceptions. And again, Swords can be perceptions because perceptions are considered or connected to what we think, what we see, and how we interpret what we see, how we think about what we see, right? So that's my story with this one. So you're at a time right now where all of the goodness from your conservative upbringing is starting to become clear that it doesn't align, and you're on the verge of changing a lot of what you think. Now, again, I'm going to pause the video, bring out the Waite-Smith cards, and see if that changes anything. All right, we're back. So, what I notice when I lay out the cards with the Waite-Smith deck is that I get a much more emotional feeling from the cards. And I don't necessarily enjoy that. I'm not opposed to it. But the swords in the Waite-Smith, and I'm glad actually that we have so many swords cards, are very negative. They're very mournful. We've got the Six of Swords, which has sort of a progressive attitude toward it, but it's sad, you know. The Four of Swords, you know, is about as you know, it's a tomb, and the Five of Swords depicts conflict. I have taught myself to ignore all of that. It takes time, and in a weird way, it's tough because I'm also asking any client that I'm reading for to ignore all of that too. But it does tell me a similar story, because again, I still know the number and the element. So even though this depicts someone in a boat moving forward, I'm more likely to think about this as an imagined journey. But I still come back to the six and the swords, which is beautiful thinking. You know, good thoughts, thinking good, feeling good. So the image doesn't matter to me that much. Contextually, it does tell me that they're moving from this area to this area. So it kind of makes it easier to see that this is a journey. But I still got that, right? They started here, they grew up this way, they liked it, now they're sort of reassessing and it messes them up. They grew up learning this, they didn't really think about it much, but it certainly made it easier to go to sleep at night. But now they're on a journey towards realizing, oh, this isn't what I thought it was. What do I really believe? And I'm shaking up my mental thinking. You know, my thinking. This may provide different and more context in different ways. You know, it may indicate relationships more. But again, I don't read them all that differently because the image is only part of the equation to me. So it's not so much that I'm being guided by the artwork. And I know that may seem odd. It's not that I'm ignoring it, right? Part of the thing, again, is that there's something contrived about how I'm doing this because I can't unknow what I know from this spread, you know? And I would read this differently, but I have to trust that whatever deck I pick up for whatever reading, the thing that makes tarot work is going to guide me to the cards that are going to get me to the same place. So it's not so much the deck I use, it's that the guides or whatever, I don't know how to talk about this stuff, right? But the divinity, the higher self, you know, whatever it is, just sort of says, okay, well, Ben's working with the Waite-Smith today, so we're going to give him cards that are going to take him on the right journey. Oh, Ben's working with the Marseille, we're going to give him cards that are going to take him on this journey. Ben's working with the Voyager, we're going to give him cards. You know what I mean? So, like, I have to trust that whatever system I'm using, I'm going to get the right answer. The language that I get may differ because the cards are going to prompt different responses, but ultimately they should give me the same answer, and these did. Now, you could make the argument that that only happened because I knew the message that I came out with here, and so it was influenced by this, and it was. Like, again, I can't unknow the message I got here. What I think is likely is that if I were doing the same reading and I had started the same reading with the Waite-Smith, then I may have gotten slightly different cards to get me this answer. These give me that answer, partly because I knew this answer, right? But it's only in trusting that the system works that I can say, whatever deck I'm using, I'm going to get the right cards. So the question comes back to sort of freedom, right? And I said that it gives me more freedom. Marseille gives me more freedom. So the reason why I said that is because of, for example, the mournful quality of the two swords, or even the three swords cards. You know what I mean? These are fairly not happy. Now, I didn't read these particularly happily either, but they're not happy. Because certainly shaking up our old thinking is good, right? But these give an emotional atmosphere that I prefer as a reader to not have to contend with. It used to be that I didn't want to contend with it because I got distracted. Now it's that I don't want the client jumping to conclusions about the feeling of the reading before we start reading the cards. So I don't want them to see the Six of Swords and say, oh no, I'm leaving behind my family or something, and I'm heading towards like all this emotional conflict. Like, in this case, they might actually be doing that. But the narrative I was able to construct was much more neutral, which allows them to hear it, or many people to hear that more easily than, oh yeah, your family's been screwing with you, you're going to have to leave them behind. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's kind of the same message, but this actually gives them the opportunity to figure out what those things are. This will give me more information, but they may be less likely to hear it because I have ignited or triggered emotions. Now, there's no, honestly, that's why I feel like working with pip decks is freeing. All of that said, I work with any deck that I'm feeling called to that day. You know what I mean? Like, it's really just about me, you know, and that took a journey. You know, there was a time where I was only working with pip decks. You know, there was a time where I was only working with Waite Smith decks. There was a time where I avoided any decks with keywords. But over time, my practice has evolved. So I can take any deck and I can read, you know, this isn't bragging, I can read with any deck. Now, I may get stronger, more intuitive, more detailed messages with decks I have an affinity for that light me up and inspire me, right? But it doesn't matter what system I'm working with. You know, I could do the same thing, with, oh, I was making a mess. I was going to grab a Thoth-based deck, but I'm making a mess, so I won't. But if it were a Thoth deck, right, like I still, it doesn't matter that it's the Thoth deck. I'm still working with my foundational understanding of how to read. And my foundational understanding really is to start, actually without looking too much at the image, except for where people are facing. So I want to sort of see interactions, right? So this interaction here, where this card is moving here and turned away from this, is interesting. And this sort of bookended, the Seven of Cups, bookended by these two cards looking at it, could be interesting, right? That could give me context. But the point really is that I'm just sort of looking where things are pointing. Then, because the images are not the card, I actually start with the things that aren't the images. So I start with the element, I start with the number, but then I bring in the images, whatever kind there are. These are images too, right? So a lot of readers will look at the decorations. Now, Charlie Claire Burgess, they gave us very specific decorations in the suits. That's not common in Marseille decks, but a lot of pip decks will. So those matter if you want them to. That's an image, that's a context. People will typically read what are called the arabesques. You know, the way that a card, like the way that the Five of Swords smashes through, and actually literally smashes through in this one. The closing quality, the closed quality of the even numbers. So this is a nice visual representation of how odd numbers smash through the stasis of even numbers. That's a context I don't get here. But if I'm looking for context, if I'm open, then either of those could occur to me. So anyway, I hope that this helps. It's really difficult to talk about, but it all ultimately comes down to having a foundation that I can rely on, that I can pull from anything. I can pull from the image, I can pull from the element, I can pull from the number, I can pull from that there's 3 swords cards, I can pull from the fact that in the last spread we got the Pope too. You know what I mean? So like all of those are things I can pull from. They're all contexts. They're all potentially meaningful, but they're no more or less valuable than the picture on the card. And the picture on the card is no more or less valuable than any of the other stuff. So anyway, it's hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it does or it doesn't. And I hope that you're well, and I hope that you're being good. And if you're not being good, then be good. And we'll talk soon. And happy June, because it's June 2nd. Bye, be good.